You know, when you're daydreaming about a trip, maybe exploring some vibrant city or just relaxing on an island somewhere,
hmm
you're almost ready to book, and then bam, a headline flashes up. Something about instability, maybe a health thing, right where you wanted to go.
Yeah, it throws a wrench in the works.
Totally. Suddenly, that dream getaway feels, well, a bit shaky. It really shows how connected everything is, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Global events, even small ones, can ripple out and affect our plans.
And figuring out what's really risky, what information to trust, that can be tough.
That's exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We're looking into global travel risks, specifically the U.S. State Department's do not travel advisories.
Right. And comparing those with other sources.
Yeah, like the CEO World Magazine safety rankings, and also some academic research on how crises, hit the tourism sector.
Okay, so the goal isn't just a list of no-go zones. We want to get into the why behind these warnings,
Yeah.
right? Give you, our listener, a clearer picture.
Exactly. For you, the learner, it's about getting that knowledge quickly, thoroughly, but without feeling, totally overwhelmed.
We've got the State Department info, looked at reports from CBS News and Princeton International for that.
And the CEO World Report for 2025, safest and most dangerous countries.
Plus that academic article from Dirgey Park on tourism and uncertainty. Sounds good.
So our mission is to pull out the key insights from all this, understand the current landscape of travel risks.
All right, let's jump in. Let's start with those U.S. State Department travel advisories. What are they actually for?
Well, the State Department puts these out for countries, and sometimes even specific spots within countries.
Okay.
The main point is to give U.S. travelers advice, assessments really, on potential challenges, health, safety, security, even logistics.
And this is public info.
Totally public. And
Okay.
while it's aimed at U.S. citizens, lots of organizations watch these, researchers, companies, you name it. Honestly, the info is useful for pretty much any traveler.
That makes sense. A good central reference point. Now, they have levels, right? We hear do not travel a lot, but what are the others?
Where there are 4 levels. Level 1 is basically exercise normal precautions,
Yep.
standard stuff for anywhere.
hmm
Level 2 is exercise increased caution. So be more aware. Maybe specific areas have higher risks.
Okay.
Level 3 is reconsider travel. That means, seriously think twice because the risks are pretty significant.
And level 4.
Level 4, do not travel. That's the highest. The State Department flat out advises U.S. citizens, don't go. Or if you're already there, leave as soon as it's safe.
Wow.
And a really key thing with level 4 countries, the U.S. government's ability to help its citizens there is often severely limited, very limited.
That definitely underlines how serious a level 4 warning is. And you said it's not always the whole country?
That's absolutely right. A country gets an overall level, sure, but the advice can be different for specific regions, border areas, cities, even down to neighborhoods sometimes.
Mhm.
Yeah. They issue these more localized warnings based on conditions right there. Mexico's a good example. The country might be, say, level 2 overall, but certain states or cities could be level 3 or 4 because of crime or kidnapping risks.
So you really need to drill down into the specific place you're planning to visit.
Absolutely crucial. Don't just look at the country level.
Okay. Now, I remember reading about risk indicators in the Princeton Guide. What are those about?
Ah, yes. The risk indicators. They're basically single letters added to the advisory, and they tell you the specific reasons for that advisory level.
Like codes.
Kind of. And one country can have multiple indicators. Maybe different ones for different areas, too.
Okay, what are they?
So C is for crime, widespread violent crime, maybe police response is limited. D is wrongful detention risk, U.S. citizens potentially being detained unfairly by the government.
Hmm.
E is for a time-limited event like elections or big sports events that could cause issues.
Hmm.
H is health risks, disease outbreaks, bad medical facilities, often linked to CDC notices.
Got it.
K is kidnap or hostage risk threats from criminals or terrorists. N is natural disaster danger from the event or its aftermath.
Okay.
A is for other risks that don't fit elsewhere. T is terrorism, past attacks, or credible threats. And U is civil unrest, political, economic, religious, ethnic instability causing violence.
Wow, that's a comprehensive list. It gives you a much better idea of the type of risk involved.
Exactly. It's much more specific than just the level number.
And the advisories include other helpful stuff too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All of them give you contact info for the local U.S. embassy or consulate, links to State Department social media for updates, CDC website for health info, the main country page on the State Dept site.
That's useful.
And for levels 2, 3, and 4, you get even more detail. Things like specific actions you should take, more info on the security situation, specific risks to Americans, and importantly, what consular services the U.S. can actually provide there.
That context seems incredibly important, especially for those higher risk levels. Now, that CBS News piece mentioned a number. How many countries were on the do not travel list as of early May 2025?
Right. According to CBS News around then, there were 21 countries carrying that level 4 do not travel advisory from the State Department.
21.
Yeah.
Okay. That gives us a baseline from the U.S. perspective. Let's switch gears a bit now to the CEO World Magazine report. World's safest and most dangerous countries for 2025. What angle are they taking?
So CEO World looked at it mainly from a security risk viewpoint.
Hmm.
They considered things like war, terrorism, organized crime, armed conflict, basically factors that pose a direct security threat to travelers.
And based on that, they flagged the most dangerous spots.
Exactly. And they also highlighted countries they considered the safest.
Okay, so what did their don't travel list for 2025 look like? Any overlap with the U.S. list?
Oh yeah, definitely some overlap. Their list, published January 15th, 2025, had 15 countries.
50.
Geographically, 2 in Europe, 4 in Africa, and 8 in Asia. The specific countries were Somalia, South Sudan, Ukraine, Libya, Sudan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Myanmar or Burma, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen, Belarus, North Korea, and Syria.
Quite a few familiar names from the U.S. list.
For sure. It reinforces the security concerns in those places. They basically said travelers should avoid these or seriously rethink any plans.
Makes sense. What about the other end of the scale? Which countries did CEO World rate as safest?
They listed Canada, the United States, the UK, Spain, France, Morocco, and Vietnam among the safest for 2025 from their security perspective.
Interesting mix there. Morocco and Vietnam alongside North America and Western Europe.
Yeah, it is.
Now, did CEO World just have the one don't travel category, or was it more nuanced? I thought I saw something about different risk levels.
You're right. It was more detailed. They had a table categorizing lots of countries across regions into different risk levels. It went from extreme risk, those 15 countries, down through high H, medium, low, and then insignificant risk. That was also in their January 15th report.
Could you give us a couple of examples for those other categories, just to get a feel for the spectrum?
Sure. So beyond the extreme list, they put countries like Haiti, Honduras, Ethiopia, and the DRC in the high HEH category.
Okay.
Then in medium risk, you had places like Mexico, Jamaica, Russia, Egypt. Low risk included Malaysia, Thailand, Spain, Australia.
Right.
And down at insignificant risk, they listed countries like Norway, Denmark, Finland, Switzerland. So yeah, it shows a really wide range of perceived safety levels.
It definitely paints a broader picture. Interesting how different groups assess these things. Speaking of which, let's look at that comparison between U.S. and Canadian advisories from the Vancouver Is Awesome article. How did their top warning lists stack up?
Well, according to that article dated May 1st, 2025, Canada was advising its citizens to avoid all travel to 22 countries, while the U.S., as we said, had 21 on its do not travel list around that time. So very similar numbers overall at the highest warning level.
Okay, and did the article list the specific U.S. countries again, maybe with dates they were added?
Yeah, it did. As of late April 2025, the U.S. list was North Korea. It was just added April 29th. Then Burkina Faso, Yemen, Iran, South Sudan, Syria, DR Congo, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Central African Republic, Belarus, Iraq, Ukraine, Venezuela, Haiti, Libya, Somalia, Russia, Burma, Mali, and Sudan, which went back to April 2023.
So those dates show it's constantly changing.
Absolutely. The article mentioned updates in March and April 2025, showing how dynamic it is.
And what about Canada's list of 22? Any major differences compared to the U.S. list?
There were a couple of interesting differences, yeah.
Right.
Canada's list included Sudan, Myanmar, Iran, Iraq, Ukraine, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, South Sudan, Somalia, Mali, Niger, DRC, specifically Kinshasa, Russia, Haiti, Lebanon, Libya, North Korea, Belarus, Venezuela, and Burkina Faso.
Okay, so what stood out as different?
The main things the article highlighted were the U.S. at that time didn't have a countrywide do not travel for Ukraine, but Canada did advise avoiding all travel there. Conversely, the U.S. did have Russia on its highest warning level, while Canada didn't have a blanket avoid all travel for the whole country.
Huh. That's really interesting. It shows different countries might weigh risks differently or have different concerns.
Exactly. It could be based on their own intel, geopolitical factors, maybe even their capacity to help citizens in trouble there.
Yeah.
It really underlines why maybe check advisories from a couple of sources if you can.
Good point. And the article also said both countries warn about specific parts of countries too, right? Not just the whole nation.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah.
Both the U.S. and Canada advise against non-essential travel, or even all travel, to specific regions within countries that aren't on the highest overall warning level.
Like Mexico again.
Mexico is a prime example, yes.
Hmm.
Both countries warn against travel to certain states there due to crime, even though the whole country isn't level 4 or avoid all travel. The piece also briefly mentioned the U.S. STEP program, Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, where citizens can register trips to be contacted in emergencies.
Useful.
And for Canada, their top level, avoid all travel, is a very strong warning. It means your safety is at great risk, and if you're there, you should really think about leaving if it's safe.
Okay, so these government warnings and rankings give us a good map of perceived danger zones. But let's get deeper into the why. That Dirgey Park academic article looked at tourism and uncertainty. What did it find?
Right, the Dirgey Park piece brings an academic lens. A key point is how flexible or maybe sensitive demand is in tourism.
Sensitive how?
Well, it's really vulnerable to all sorts of negative events. Wars, political instability, obviously, but also environmental disasters, tech accidents, terrorism, economic slumps, epidemics, even changes in political rules can throw things off.
It seems like almost anything major can impact it.
Pretty much. And the research also shows that bad experiences during these crises can stick with people. It can affect their travel habits, where they choose to go, for a long time afterwards.
Yeah, I can see that. If a place gets known for a crisis, rebuilding trust takes time.
Definitely. But interestingly, the article also notes tourism's resilience.
Resilience. How so?
Despite being easily hit, the sector often bounces back relatively quickly. Part of that is just the nature of tourism, but also the adaptability of the businesses and people involved. They often have to react fast and change strategies.
Okay, so it gets hit hard, but it can recover. What specific factors did the article pinpoint as major causes of tourism crises?
It broke them down into several areas. One big one is political and legal regulations.
How does that work?
Changes in government policies like new taxes on tourism, entry fees, travel restrictions can have a direct impact. And general political instability is a huge factor.
Any examples?
Yeah, they gave some specific ones. The Öcalan crisis between Italy and Turkey, tensions over the Armenian genocide issue affecting France-Turkey travel, the 1-minute crisis between Israel and Turkey.
Yeah.
In all those cases, tourist numbers from the involved countries dropped noticeably.
Wow, it really shows that direct link between diplomacy and tourism dollars, or lack thereof. What other factors?
Natural disasters, of course. Huge impact. The article mentioned the big earthquakes in Mexico in '85 and Turkey in '99.
Right.
Led to tons of cancellations, drops in both international and domestic tourism. The 2017 quake in China's Zhuangzi area was another example, causing a long-term dip in visitors there.
And things like hurricanes?
Yep, hurricanes too. Side of the ones hitting Belize in 2001, causing major economic damage, especially when tourism is a big part of the economy. It just shows how fast nature can shut things down.
Absolutely devastating. What about the economy itself, financial crises?
Economic factors are massive. Big downturns like the 2008 global crisis or the '97 Southeast Asian crisis. Generally, people have less money to spend, right?
Sure.
So travel gets postponed, spending goes down.
Yeah.
That means fewer tourists, less revenue. Simple as that for the most part.
But wait, didn't the article mention something different about a Turkish crisis?
Yeah, good point. The 2000-2001 Turkish financial crisis. Because the currency devalued so much, it actually made Turkey cheaper for international visitors. So paradoxically, it had a short-term positive effect on inbound tourism there.
Huh. That's counterintuitive, but makes sense. So it's not always a negative impact from an economic crisis. What about environmental stuff beyond natural disasters? Technology.
Yeah, environmental and technological conditions matter too. Industrial accidents, pollution. The article mentioned the Bhopal gas leak in India having an impact, and Chernobyl.
Chernobyl. How did that affect tourism elsewhere?
Well, for Turkey, it didn't necessarily cause a huge drop in the number of tourists arriving, but tourism revenue fell. Probably because of a perception of wider regional risk, people maybe spent less or stayed shorter times. These kinds of events really damage a destination's image.
It's all about perception sometimes, isn't it? The article also mentions sociocultural factors. How do they fit in?
Right, sociocultural factors. Tourism can be great for cultural exchange, preserving traditions, all that positive stuff. But it can also cause problems. Local traditions might get watered down or commercialized. Cultural clashes can happen if tourists are disrespectful, or if there's a big gap between tourist wealth and local poverty. These tensions can create a sort of crisis within the community, which affects the whole experience.
It's a tough balance to strike. Okay, the article then dug deeper into some of those major crisis types, starting with political crises again.
Yes, political crises. Things like general instability, military coups, Fiji in '87 and 2000 were examples where tourism plummeted immediately after coups, and political revolts all scared tourists away. It revisited those diplomatic spats, too, like the Ecolon issue, to show how international politics directly hits tourism numbers.
And financial crises.
Financial crises, yeah. Market turmoil restricts spending, hits tourism hard. The '97 Asian crisis and the 2008 global crisis were the key examples, again, impacting arrivals and revenue, though the '08 crisis hit different regions differently.
Okay. Then, unfortunately, terrorism.
Crises caused by terrorism. Tourism is just so sensitive to security worries. The article listed historical examples: the IRA in Northern Ireland, PKK in Turkey, ETA in Spain. The 1999 attacks in Turkey caused a big drop in visitors.
Egypt, too, right?
Egypt suffered big losses from attacks. And of course, 9/11 in the U.S. and the London bombings had huge, immediate negative impacts on visitor numbers and tourism income. Security fears are a major deterrent.
Absolutely. Finally, the article covered health-threatening crises. That feels very relevant now.
Extremely relevant. Health crises, disease outbreaks, they make people scared to travel and disrupt everything. The article mentioned the long-term drag of high HIV rates on tourism in some regions.
And specific outbreaks.
Yes, it detailed several.
Right.
The foot and mouth disease in the UK in 2001, fewer tourists, less spending, especially from Japan. SARS in 2003 hit Asia-Pacific tourism hard, especially Hong Kong. Air travel slumped, hotels suffered, jobs were lost, big drops in arrivals and revenue.
I remember SARS.
Then the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, 2014-2015. Devastating for affected countries like Sierra Leone. Huge drops in tourists and money.
And then the big one, COVID-19.
Right. The COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 to 2022, the article calls it the biggest crisis in tourism history, period.
Understandably.
Global lockdowns, international travel basically stopped overnight. Hotels closed, events canceled. The numbers are just staggering.
What kind of number?
Compared to 2019, over those 3 years, the world lost something like 2.6 billion international tourist arrivals.
Billion.
Billion. Estimated loss of 2.6 trillion US dollars in export revenues from tourism. And about $4.2 trillion lost from tourism's direct contribution to global GDP. Just massive, unprecedented losses.
That is absolutely mind-boggling. It just drives home how vulnerable tourism is to these huge global shocks. Okay, let's try to pull this all together. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways from everything we've covered?
I think the big picture is that travel risks are really dynamic, and they come from all sorts of places. The U.S. State Department warnings, the CEO world rankings, the academic research, they all show this.
Right.
Those do not travel warnings have serious reasons behind them. Other sources give different perspectives on safety, and we see clearly how crises, political, economic, natural disasters, health scares have huge measurable impacts on tourism. It affects visitor numbers, local economies, jobs, everything.
And for you listening, understanding these factors, knowing where to find this info, it just helps you make smarter, safer choices about your own travel. Getting that why behind a warning gives you so much more context than just a list.
It really does.
Yeah.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe. Given how connected our world is and how these major events seem to be happening more often, how does tourism need to adapt?
Good question. Both the industry and us as travelers.
Yeah. How do we need to adjust our planning, our expectations, and maybe what responsibility do we have as travelers to understand the risks and also the impact our choices have on the places we visit?
That's definitely something to chew on. Being an informed traveler seems more important than ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We hope digging into these sources has helped with that. Definitely encourage you to explore them further if you're planning a trip.